How's it going, everybody? Hope you're having a good day today. My name is Sam Dando, and we are going to be doing a deck tech for Cindra, Dracai, Retribution. So first things first, kind of like my last video, if you had seen it for Phi, the other Draconic Ninja, I've been kind of on and off here, trying out Cindra, thinking that Phi is probably the better deck. But after I made that deck tech, obviously I talked to a lot of people, and I just kept seeing Cindra's results flop time and time again and just have really bad conversion rate. And I just had to sit back and think, why? Why is that the case? You know, the deck is not fundamentally bad. It has a lot of the same card pool as Phi. Its whole mechanic between daggers and flick knives is very powerful. Where are things going wrong right now? So I looked at all the red line lists, and I have been deep in the tank for like the last 4 weeks, looking at every list that I could possibly consume, talking to so many different players about the deck, really trying to get an understanding of what's going wrong, what's not working, and how is this deck continuing to not convert super well. And I think that we started off with the super red line list, which is a very easy, straightforward idea when you first look at the deck, right? You just put in all the red cards, you just attack. And it's very much so like most aggro deck iterations we see. We just try to crank them to the max, make them as fast as possible first. And then once that starts failing, you then have to try to start innovating to create something that's more consistent, a little bit more resilient. And I think that's where we got now. Right out of the gate, Cindra was very powerful in the meta, but people adapted. They started to learn how to play against the deck. And then you have all these other counters now like Jarl, and then Aurora, who's super fast. And then all these other decks that are teching now with, they finally bought their Shelter from the Storms and Calming Breeze, and all these cards that really shut down Cindra. So we've had to adapt, right? So here we are today. There's been a lot of talk about people creating blue line lists or whatever that would mean and like what the proper ratio is. So when I've been out, I started with 3 blues, and then I went to 6 blues, then I went to 9 blues, then I went to 15, and then to 12. So I have really been trying every single iteration I can of Cindra to really understand the deck, really understand what works best for me, and to create this monstrosity that I'm going to show you today that I think for me is the best version that I've been able to come up with, but I guarantee in like a week or 2 weeks or after Pro Tour, there's going to be more changes and innovations done to the list. I could have waited to do this video probably for another month, but I really needed to just come out and put it out there and stop delaying, because I figure if any of the ideas that I present to you guys can help evolve the deck or create something better, then that will help speed up the process of us finding a more innovative and more consistent list across the board. So just keep that in mind as we go into this. I'm not saying at all that this is the perfect deck or that this is the proper way to play Cindra. It's just through all of my trial and error, this is the list that I have found to get close to having the tools and the resources that I need to play against all the different decks in the meta, and for the deck to perform as consistently as possible. So let's just get right into this. This is probably going to be a long video. There's a lot of things I feel like I want to talk about as we go through this. There's so many interesting little nuances about Cindra that I've learned as I've played, and I really do think that the deck has a very high skill ceiling. It's a very difficult deck to play, and it really reminds me of right like in the center mix between Katsu and Phi. And I've played a lot of Phi and I've played a lot of Katsu. So it might be biasing my opinion of how Cindra needs to be played, but I am kind of putting her right in between. And I'm looking at the deck very similarly to as if it was a hybrid between those decks. So going forward, as you look at my list, that might help you conceptualize where I'm coming from. So to start, we have, again, Blaze Headlong. Don't need to talk about this. It's in every single Cindra list. And then we have our normal Draconic starters. We have 3 Rising Resentment, 3 Brand, 3 Ronin, and then the 3 Ignite. This might already be a little bit of a detraction from what other people are doing in their lists. Again, I'm looking at this kind of like a Phi Katsu hybrid, and I'll get more into why I think the starters are important as we continue the conversation. But there will be times where you will have your dagger stranded, you might overextend and have both of them in the discard pile. So you want to make sure you still have natural starters so that you can open your turn to retrieve your daggers back. If you don't have them, it can get really difficult to get your on and off again turns back on so that you can have your daggers attached. So I think it's really important to have the Draconic starters in the deck still. Obviously, Brand in this deck is very powerful because you have a number of cards that you get rewarded for turning them into Draconic. I also play 2 yellow Brand, and we'll get to that when we get to the yellows. And then the Rising Resentment is very, very good because you do have some 1-cost cards that you want to discount, so the on-hit is still just as potent as it is in Fi, and a lot of times it's even more powerful than it is in Fi. And now we have like our follow-up cards, our second chain Draconic cards. So we have Hot on Their Heels, which actually has text in this compared to Biphylis. Marking is very good in this deck, along with Burning Blade Dance. This card's really good. I love this card. Being able to just clear your second dagger so you can retrieve it back, such a good card. I'm a big fan of that. And then we have our one of our fealty generators. We have 3 Display Loyalty. Again, very good card. Need to be played, in my opinion, just to get that free fealty online, which can unlock so many different lines for the deck. And then I play 2 Demonstrate Devotion, which is a 1 cost, but similar to Display Loyalty. You're going to see I have a lot of 2-ofs in this deck, even some 1-ofs, just because I'm finding the ratios to be a little difficult to tune to find what's the most consistent. And I'm finding that cards like this, where you don't ever really want to see 2 of it in your hand, 2 seems to be the perfect number. And as I look at a lot of other lists, they are also seeming to concede. A lot of them are resolving to put this at 2. Now, one of the big differences that I'm seeing as I'm looking at a lot of lists is I don't quite see as many people playing Spreading Flames, and this card is absolutely insane. I have no idea what people are not playing this. I think if you're playing Cindra, you just have to have Spreading Flame in the deck. I will never play a Cindra deck that is not playing Spreading Flames. This card is so ridiculous. So many times it becomes a 1 for 7 because your daggers, as long as you have 2 daggers and you set up the turn with the Spreading Flames, the buffs apply to your daggers, so they become 2s. So 1 for 2 go again each. And then all your other Draconic attacks turn online basically at that point. And your 0 for 3s become 0 for 4s. And you very regularly can get your 0 for 4s to be buffed to 5s. Spreading Flames on average for me, like I was saying, is like 1 for 7, 1 for 8. So it's one of your like huge turns when you do have a Spreading Flames turn, and it's ridiculously powerful. I just do not understand why people are not playing Spreading Flames. It is so good in this deck. And then you have your big boy finishers. You got the Art of the Dragon Fire. I've tried Scales, I've tried Breaking Point, I've tried all the different 1 for 5s. I even played Censor at one point, and none of them are quite as good as Art of the Dragon Fire. Your win condition for this deck is inflicting damage, right? One of the big differences that Cindra has compared to Fi or other decks is what I refer to as true damage. I was saying this when I was casting for the Battle Hardened, and I saw some people in the comments after the fact questioning, like, what does he mean by true damage? What does that mean? So true damage is in reference to damage that cannot be blocked by a normal, normal blocking, right? So it requires prevention or some alternative defensive way to stop it. So Flick Knives is an example of true damage. Unless your opponent specifically has some sort of preventative effect, it is good to be doing damage straight to them. Along with Art of the Dragon Fire, its effect where it will inflict 2 damage, that is true damage. It is going to just do the 2 damage unless they have some sort of prevention. So that is one of the main things that separates Cindra from Fi or other decks, is her ability to continually inflict true damage to your opponent and eventually whittle them down till they're in like lethal positions where they will just die because they have no way to stop the damage that you're inflicting to them. And I think that is among the board one of the main things that I've been building into in the list is I don't want to lean into on hits because there's decks that do that better. I don't want to lean into like pure mask drawing advantage. I want to lean into I'm going to have bursts and I'm going to have on and off again turns, and I'm going to have true damage that eventually you will not be able to stop, and I will just whittle you away until you die. Along with the daggers, like actually swinging the daggers for 1 each, it gets very hard to stop that damage unless they have, again, Shelter from the Storm or some other equipment piece like Phantasmal Footsteps or something. But eventually that damage does add up, much like Katsu with the Kodachis, and it becomes very difficult in an endgame state to avoid all the damage and also play around with Flick Knives. And then this card, again, I haven't really seen a lot of people playing it. I have recently added it and have been really big fan of this card. Devotion Never Dies. I'm playing 2 of it. A big thing about Cindra is if you're playing Mask Momentum, which I'm playing Lynx and Mask Momentum, and that's going to be a whole nother conversation we get into later. But Mask Momentum is one of the most potent on-hits that the deck has, right? So you're always playing this mini game with your opponent of saying, can I get my draw, or will you be able to block me out to prevent my draw? And what will happen is a lot of decks now have the tools to be able to prevent you from getting your draw or your on-hit from Mask. So what happens is after that happens, you usually don't have another threatening on hit, which is why people are playing like the 1-for-5s or like the punish on hits. But I'm finding that a lot of times people don't care about those, or they will be able to block them out as well. But Devotion Never Dies offers a lot of flexibility between being a punishing on hit and also just being a on hit that you can mix in between. It doesn't have to be a chain ender. So not only could it be a potential on hit punisher at the end where it can extend out and do more damage, it can also be weaved into the middle and aid your onboard punishes at the end, like Salt the Wound. You know, having this card with Salt or this card with Tenacity aids those as punish cards at the end because your opponent is incentivized to block these, or if they don't block them, it's going to add up to be a lot of damage. There's so many interesting interactions with Devotion Never Dies. For example, like obviously it combos with your daggers, so if you play this after a dagger, it will get its effect. But you can also create, with a fealty, you can create, you could pop fealty, make this Draconic, so then it starts weaving into itself. So you can, I've had turns where I've devotioned somebody like 4 times because I just kept cracking fealty, and this just kept looping off of itself, which is really, really punishing for an opponent. If they don't respect it or they are unable to block it, you can really just start looping some crazy damage. And similarly, like with Brand with Cinderclaw and this card making it Draconic, can continue to like loop within itself. So I would really recommend you try this. I have been a huge fan of this card. Most people don't know how to play around it, or they don't expect it when you do play it. It just kind of adds into another layer of punish, but also extension, which I think is like a big balance within this deck, is finding cards that are able to punish but extend. And I think that's like the intermediary of finding consistency within the deck, because you either end up with too many ender punishers and then you have a lot of bricks, or you end up with too many starters like over here and then you don't really have a lot of overrate punishes or things that are really powerful that your opponent is going to suffer from. But I think this card works perfectly in the intermediary of that. And I was playing 3, but it's just a little too clunky. Again, I really want to maintain the consistency of being Draconic and adding more cards that are not naturally Draconic or don't play alongside of that lines. You also notice that like I have very limited 1 costs. I think this is all the 1 costs, I have in the deck. There's 10. I found that when I was going above 10, it was just starting to get a little too inconsistent for my tastes, and I just couldn't manage like the 12 1-cost finishers with like Art of Dragon Scale and Breaking Point and Art of Dragon Fire. I just wanted to prioritize the best of the best and then limit them down so that I don't end up having too many of them in my hand at one point. Now we have like the Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I mean, this card is like straight up a Yu-Gi-Oh card. I have no idea, to be honest, why they even created this card other than it being fun. But it is so unfun for your opponent when it's played. Wrath of Retribution has won me so many games single-handedly. There's so many just broken interactions with this card in the deck that I'll again get to when at the end I kind of want to actually go through combos, because there's so many different weird little nuances in the deck. But this card's stupid. Like I just think that if this card didn't exist, the deck would still be okay, just giving it as an add-on little like oops you win kind of card, which there seem to do more now with other decks. It's, again, I'm not unhappy about the card. I think it's ridiculous, but I think it's a very insane card, especially when you're playing blues. You don't have to play out all your attacks and then end with this. You can start your turn with Wrath of Retribution when you have a blue. You just pitch the blue, play this, and then you end up just having, at minimum, a 2-card 7. A lot of times it's an 8 because you flick and then recur the dagger, and then it's a 10 after that, right? So imagine if you had 1 more card or 2 more cards, how ridiculous that damage can be for a few more sequences. Again, I'm already kind of going off about this card, but we'll get to it later on. And then I'm playing 1 Art of the Dragon Blood. I was finding when you switch to a further blue line list and I start stepping away from more of the 1 costs, this card loses a lot of its value. Unfortunately, it's a really sick card, especially in red line. It's insane. But in a list that's more focused around blues, it really starts to lose its value, and it also becomes just kind of clunky. Outside of it just having good stat lines as a 3-block, 0-cost, 4-damage card, which is pretty good. And then kind of getting go again after with fealty. So it's like semi-conditional go again. It is still a really good card, and it does come up frequently, but you also will notice that a lot of my 1-costs are not Draconic, right? Half of them are not Draconic, half of them are. So it's not always as relevant to me to have the discount effect, but I still like having it as a 1-of because it is powerful when you can have your big setup turns, and it has a lot of utility against Jarl. Some of you players who have been playing since Uprising might know about these interactions, but if you haven't, there are so many strange reduction cost rulings with Draconic that allow you to get around Frostbites. So any kind of card like this or Rising Resentment that says reduce the cost will actually supersede Frostbites. So if I attack with this and its effect is online and they stalagmite me, for example, and I get a Frostbite, I could still play one of my 0 cost cards for free because it's essentially reducing its cost by a -1. So it just clears Frostbite at that point. So there's a lot of interaction in ice decks that this card is very relevant in. Again, and it also can help you like with Wrath of Retribution. So I still see it as having value. It still comes up in my games where it's actually very powerful. But when I was playing more than one, it ultimately just felt clunky and unnecessary with a lot of the other resources that I have in the deck, being that I'm playing blues and yellows as well. And then my last 2 red cards are my true finishers, 2 Lava Burst. Again, this is coming from a Phi background, but this card is still super powerful. It's very buff rate. It's still very relevant. And it's still very relevant with Spreading Flames as well, so that you can get that buff on curve. And again, I was playing it at 3, just didn't feel as good at 3 for some reason. I don't know, so I cut it back down to 2, and it feels perfect. It's also another target for Link's Mask, which is in the sideboard, like I mentioned before. So although you have the traditional punishers, Basalt and Tenacity, still having Lava Burst as a tutorable card for those turns where you're under Spreading Flames or something like that, it's still just super powerful. I really have been happy with Lava Burst at 2. I think the card is very strong, and in the list, it's easier than ever to get off with having daggers and being able to build up to 4 chain links with relative ease. In addition to it being Draconic, which is very relevant with the Dragon Scalers, there's a lot of times you can double finisher with it. Since it is just a natural Draconic card, it does come up, and it's very relevant in those scenarios as well, where you can sometimes double finisher with like this in Dragonfire or something. All right, on to the yellows / resources. Again, I'm playing my 2 yellow brand of Cinderclaw. You just know me. Draconic Ninja just doesn't feel right unless you're playing 2 brand with Cinderclaw, yellow, and this deck felt the same. Again, I played it at 3, felt like a little too much. Played it at 1, didn't feel like enough. Having it at 2 is the perfect amount. And again, being yellow, being able to pitch to swing both daggers, super relevant. And then giving other cards Draconic, like Devotion and obviously Dragonfire, it's all very relevant. So I like the 2. And again, also tutorable by Link's Mask, which is not something to scoff at. Now we have our blues. Blues really suck in this deck, which is why people are incentivized to play as much red line as possible. So I totally get that. But I think you're in a position now where you have to play the blues, and the blues end up raising your ceiling quite a bit in terms of just your consistent damage output every turn. So Throw Dagger is the best blue in the deck by far. If I could play 6 Throw Dagger, I would. This card is so good. Having it be like the pseudo-ancestral empowerment of daggers is great. Being able to clear daggers is great. Being able to cycle to draw another card is great. Being able to keep Mask Momentum trigger online by throwing a dagger is great. Everything about this card is great. Again, a broken record, if I could play 6, I would, but I'm only allowed to play 3, so there is no doubt in my mind every deck should be playing 3 Throw Dagger. And then we have 3 Dragon Power. This is the second best blue in the deck for sure. Again, it's just a finisher that plays off of your other cards. It interacts with Fealty. It's a 3-block. It's everything you want in a blue in a Draconic Ninja. And it's just an insane card yet again. So I'm very happy playing this. I'm not unsatisfied at all having this as a blue. Now we get to slightly worse blues. We have Warmongers. Again, like if you watched my 5 video, I think that Warmongers is super powerful still in this meta against a number of decks, like now Dash.io, it's very relevant. Azalea. Vincent, it's not as relevant, but it still is. Even Assassin at some points. So I still think Warmongers has a lot of merit. There aren't a lot of other blues that are more valuable to play anyway than Warmongers, and it doesn't really hurt you as an Assassin. It just really sucks as Cindra, where if you draw this and you have to arsenal it, it just really sucks to try to arsenal Warmongers in a deck that doesn't care about it at all. So you end up in some awkward situations sometimes where I will purposely break the chain link to remove both of my daggers and then pitch the Warmongers to recur them both, which red line lists are unable to do, but a blue line list can do, and it's actually not too bad to set up for your next turn. So it still has a lot of merit, but it is, I will concede, one of the worst blues in the deck, but not as bad as this next blue, Concealed Blade. This card is so bad. If I didn't have to play it, I totally would. Once the Mistveil heroes and New in particular are gone, I will be so excited to cut this card. It's hard to describe how useless it feels a lot of times. Sometimes it really messes you up too, because it will throw off your ability to recur a dagger, or it'll gunk up your dagger slot when you wanted to recur a dagger in the middle of your turn. I very rarely actually use its ability. I think I block with this card probably more than any other card in the deck, but it's like a necessary evil. You have to play it so you don't get in those bad situations where you get caught out by a passover, or again, New doing like double banishes or something, and then for the rest of the game you don't have daggers. You just can't afford that. So you're priced into having to play 2 of them. Some people are playing 3. I just want to play like as few as possible, but I think 2 is the proper number. And then to replace the 3rd one, I'm playing 1 Exposed. Similar to Concealed Blade, but actually better. If I didn't have to play Concealed Blade, I'd probably play Exposed. But again, it gets +1 to any attack, so it doesn't have to be a ninja attack, which attack action card. Sorry, so you can do this on a dagger as well. And then it will mark your opponent. So that is just very, very powerful in this deck. Having fealty generation is very powerful. This was I was taught about this one from one of my local friends, Chris. And at first I was kind of like, I don't know about this. And then I thought about it and I tried it and I was like, okay, no, this card's actually quite good. I'm very happy with Exposed. As a blue, again, you don't want like more non-blocks, because the nice thing about Cindra is you actually are pretty resilient with a lot of 3 blocks. So just playing the 1 to replace the 3rd Concealed Blade is so much better in my opinion, and I've been very happy with it. So this is like my main deck core. Very few of this stuff comes out when I'm siding, other than maybe the Demonstrate Devotion at times. But outside of that, I think this is... I tried playing without 12 blues, and the problem with it is you just don't quite have enough. So I have kind of had to keep the 12 blue core as it is, no matter how I side. I feel like you have to keep the 12 blues. It's just like kind of the backbone of the resource curve that the deck is built upon, and it just allows for the consistency to continue to do your bigger plays. So I think you have to keep it at these 12 blues, no matter how you side. So let me get to the sideboard now. Before we go to the sideboard, I am going to talk about my equipment, because I think the equipment is another really, really pivotal part of Cindra and a huge part of the deck as a whole right now, and how you can succeed in a more open meta with a lot of different decks trying to target you as well, right? Because now everyone knows about Cindra. They kind of know the game plan and how it works. So they're all kind of developing sideboard or playstyle differentiators to beat you. So again, we have Cindra, we have our fealty, of course, and now we have our double daggers. No surprises here. I'm not playing anything special there. The whole deck is completely built around the kunai, so you got to play the kunai. And it's a really sick weapon. All the play interactions I think are so interesting with this deck, so I'm a huge fan of how it works. And you get to play like my favorite equipment in the game. So you have Mask Momentum, you have Blood Splattered Vest, you got Flick Knives, you got Dragon Scaler. So these are like, this suite here is probably like my favorite equipment in Flesh and Blood history to this point. I was considering trying to find a way to play Tunic, but the thing that the Blood Splattered Vest allows is you can really just pump everything into one big turn if necessary. In a lot of matchups, you might get to that point where you get that one turn and you just want to front load everything for like a big wombo combo turn. And Blood Splattered really allows for that. Although Tuning does help you with more consistency across long matches, having the burst potential from Blood Splatter I think is still just more important. But it's pretty insane, like some of the things they were able to do with this card. And then we have Lynx Mask. This is some newer tech that I think people are now starting to discover and are starting to incorporate into their lists. I think it's extremely necessary for a number of matchups right now, and I'll get into that. That's going to be quite a long conversation, I think, once we start analyzing the sideboard as well. And then since you are playing more blues, you can support Tide Flippers. I think you have to play Tide Flippers into Vincent and Kano, obviously, but outside of those matchups, I don't play it into anything else. I'm not playing it into Aurora. You're just trying to race her. And then we have our third bad kunai that we have to play because it's Concealed Blade. But once we don't have to play that card, this can be removed, fortunately, and we could get some more space. I don't know if there ever will be a point where that happens, to be honest. I'm assuming as the game continues on, especially with Necromancer, there's probably going to be more graveyard hate or more cards that interact with graveyard as a whole. So we might just be moving to a point in Flesh and Blood where that's just not possible. You're always going to have some kind of recursion method to make sure you don't lose your daggers entirely. But for the time being, this is what we have to work with. All right, now let's get to the sideboard, because this is where things get interesting. So to start, I'm playing, you might, if you've seen my 5 videos, recognize a lot of these cards, because I do think the sideboard core for that deck was very relevant and actually very solid. And so I'm applying a lot of those theories to this list as well, which again is the Phi side of this deck, but you'll also see the Katsu side of this deck. So we're playing for combat checks, we're playing Rake Over the Coals. I know you might look at this and be like, Sam, please, you are just so like lost in the sauce for this card. But I promise you, I will explain there's a lot of relevance to this card. In addition to the 2 Ancestral Empowerment, I'm only citing the Ancestral Empowerment in when I am playing Mask of Momentum. When I'm not playing Mask of Momentum, I'm not playing this card. And then we have our Punishers. We have 2 Tenacity, 2 Salt. Again, this is for Lynx Mask. Sometimes I do play Salt when I'm playing Mask of Momentum as well, just because it's a really powerful endgame finisher, or not endgame, but like end chain finisher. And it's a yellow, which is very important to the resource curve. Then we have our D-Reacts. Again, same kind of D-React setup that I had from Phi. And then I also am playing 2 Blood Runs Deep, which I'll put into like the pseudo finishers. This card is very interesting. It kind of transcends both between Mask of Momentum and Lynx Mask. Both it has very interesting implications in. Obviously for Mask of Momentum, it helps because it can retain your chain link. When you're playing this, it shoots the daggers and they hit. So even if they block this, you're still building the chain. You've still been on a continuous hit. So it's really good in that sense. It's really good for recurring your daggers. Obviously, that's like the whole point of the card is you can play it, it bursts your daggers, you can bring them back. But it also has crazy implication with Lynx Mask because it is a 2 attack card, so it's tutorable from Lynx, and it can really fill out the intermediary part of your Wombo combo turn. So you weave this in the middle on like a Wrath or a Wrath of Retribution turn, which can be just insane. It can raise your ceiling super high, or you could do this on like Assault turn, which I've done where I tutor this out, or I tutor out Assault, and I have this card. You go like dagger, dagger, play this, burst, recall your daggers, dagger, dagger, and then salt them, right? So you've hit them multiple times, and it bursts them even harder with your salt endgame finisher. So this is kind of like a glue card that really helps between both Lynx Mask and Momentum, and can really flesh out your game plans for either or, whether it be wanting to have more on hits, or more damage, or just more dagger recursion. I'm a big fan of this card. It's kind of come in and out of the list repeatedly, but as I play without it more, and then I play with it, I just kind of understand more of its value and how it helps throughout the both styles of gameplay. And then we have my classic, obviously, double Command and Conquer, because I still think it's the best popper / utility card. And I actually play this card quite a bit into other aggro decks, because having a higher blue count, you can support playing CNC as Cindra, primarily because of the Blood Splattered Vest, and because of Mask Momentum. Your opponent is already incentivized to block you because they don't want you to get your on hit with Mask Momentum. It's kind of similar why Devotion Never Dies is quite good, is because you're already baiting out an on hit that they are trying to play around. So having a secondary one that they're not expecting at the end can be really detrimental. So a lot of common, like with CNC, you can pitch a blue, go dagger, dagger, play like any 0 for 3, right? They're incentivized to block it, so they do. You flick a dagger, gain a resource from Blood Splatter, and then play the CNC afterwards. So you're still carrying on the Mask of Momentum on hit trigger, and now they have to deal with a CNC on hit as well at the end that can just kind of blow up their turn. So it can really steal a lot of tempo back against aggro decks, and it's really good against Riptide. It's really good against Azalea. It's very good against Enigma. Again, it's a popper for Prism. So I have found this card to just have more versatility in Cindra than it does in Phi necessarily, because it can be an actual playable card rather than just a card with a big number on it, right, as a popper. And then we have my favorite card in the whole deck, which is the entire reason that I prefer Cindra over Fi right now. Not even out of like, I think it's a better deck, just purely out of flavor and the fact that I can play this. Imperial Seal of Command. If you are playing Cindra and you're not playing this card, I do not know what to tell you. You need to be on this card. It is such a crazy card that nobody is paying attention to right now. Let me just read it in case you're looking at this and being like, I have no idea, I didn't even know this card existed. It is a legendary, so you can only play one of them. It's a Yu-Gi-Oh card. It says action, destroy this. Defense reactions can't be played this turn. The entire turn, defense reactions can't be played. And then it says, if you are royal, the next time you hit a hero this turn, destroy all cards in their arsenal. And it has go again. So you have to take up a turn to play it, but once it's on board, even if you flick them and a dagger hits them, their arsenal gets destroyed. Now we're in a meta where all these degenerates are playing like 12D reacts, 9D reacts. You have Florian, right? You got Enigma, you have Verdance, you have, what else? Riptide. This card just absolutely destroys Riptide. But you have all these decks, Jarl also, that are trying to prevent you from playing your game. They want to hold back. They can really delay you. So what's the best way to burst through them? Just have a mega wombo turn where you have this sitting on board. Now they have to constantly be aware of their arsenal, be worried about what they have in arsenal, and know that you can just destroy it basically whenever you want. I've won so many games just because I've established this card, and then I had my turn with Link's Mask or whatever that I was ready to pop off. I turned this card sideways, and then they literally just get bursted down and die. I'm extremely impressed with this card. Again, if you're playing Cindra, you have no idea what this card does, you really should consider playing it because it is super, super impactful in this meta right now. And I think it's very underplayed and very underrepresented in terms of the amount of lists that I've seen of Cindra and how few of them are actually playing the card. So this is my big PSA to you. Please play Imperial Seal. This card is crazy. There's a reason why it was the content creator promo that, you know, I am fortunate to have a cold foil of right now. But the card definitely has a lot of sauce and a lot of juice, and I think that people are not extracting that juice as they should be. Okay, this is my list. So let me take a breath here. Let's get into what the heck this is trying to do. So I have somewhat of a transformative board here. I believe that I have 52 cards in the main deck, which allows me to side in 8 cards. If you're going to be defensive, you have your 6D reacts, and then you have your, again, so Ancestral Empowerment comes in whenever I'm playing Mask Momentum. If you're going to be playing Mask, the decks that I'm playing Mask Momentum against now are primarily like the aggro decks, the Mirror, Verdance. Any deck that you believe you can actually get your on-hit trigger against, it's worth playing. But then you have to get into the more defensive matchups. So you have Florian, you have Jarl, you have, what else? Riptide. You know, those decks you're going to want to be playing Mask of the Pouncing Links. And you know what, to be honest, I'm actually trying it against Aurora as well. Aurora is quite a difficult matchup. I feel like they just have better numbers. They just do more broken things. So if you can just have like a mega burst turn with Link's Mask, I'm actually employing that as a strategy. A big thing with Ninja that has been kind of a strat, I think, among more seasoned ninjas over the years is that if you go first in an aggro matchup, you can use Link's Mask. And then if you go second, you play Mask of Momentum. Because the idea is if you're going second, you're going to be the one initiating tempo. And there's no better way to push tempo than having your Mask of Momentum trigger. And if you're going first, you're already in a deficit, right? You're already in a life deficit, a tempo deficit. So having a card that can basically skip 2 turns of value allows you to be able to stabilize the game or at least level the playing field again to where they will be putting out damage. So going first against an Aurora, I've been trying playing Link's Mask with Salt the Wound and then 1 Tenacity as well. So that way, if they do end up playing Face Purgatory, right, they block 3 cards or put all their armor, Tenacity can still be a very, very brutal punisher for them. And then also Salt can end up being like a 9 damage card in this deck. Because with all the dagger hits and all the little damage that you can inflict, Salt ends up being way bigger in this. It kind of reminds me of like old school Fi when you used to be able to salt people for like 9 or 10. You can actually do that in this deck. So I'm trying that. It's been working pretty well. There's still a number of matchup things that I want to figure out with this list, that there's a lot of experimentation to be done. Again, we're in such a diverse meta There's so many different ways to approach it, and Cindra is such a flexible deck with how it's built like this. You can really swap your game plan depending on how you want to approach the matchup. Now let's talk about Rake Over the Coals. So Rake Over the Coals is a combat trick like Ancestral Empowerment, so it can be quite tricky. It is a burst card, so when you want to advance and go really fast, it can help you do those mega turns. But the biggest thing about Rake Over the Coals is, as people are playing Shelter, they're playing Calming Breeze now, those cards just absolutely hose you. And I don't want that to be one of the detriments to the list, because I know as Cindra players, right, we've all had those games where you attack with a dagger and then they use Shelter. You're like, okay, well, there goes one turn. You go to your next turn. You go dagger, they do another Shelter, and you're like, now I'm down like 2 turns basically. But with Rake Over the Coals, you don't have to worry about that, because you go dagger, they play Shelter, and then you play Rake. And now you're puncturing through every bit of damage that they're preventing, and it allows you to continue your momentum. And you can also just start looping your daggers at this point. And since this applies to everything, you can just pull some crazy damage out of this, especially when you're doing a Spreading Flames turn. Because if you have this in Spreading Flames, now each of your daggers are doing 3 damage apiece, and a 1 for 3 go again, if you're not aware, is really insane, especially when you have the Dragon Scalar Flight Path, where you can give a dagger another bit of, you can have it attack again. So you can just get really out of hand with multiplicative damage as you continue to ramp and abuse Rake Over the Coals. I've actually been very impressed with this card. Again, Chris was the one who kind of put it on my radar. I, again, have been very high on the card in Fi. Didn't really think about its implication in Cindra as much, but when you have the daggers and you can attack with daggers like 4 times in a turn, up to 5 times potentially with the Dragon Scalar Flight Path, there's just so much value you can extract out of it, and it helps counter all the prevention effects and the defensive abilities that these new decks are trying to employ against you. So I'm a huge fan of Rake Over the Coals. Yeah, I don't think there's much else to discuss on the sideboard here other than that I have been changing a lot. I have really thought this out and been really, really meticulous about the cards that I have in my sideboard. If you are afraid of Kano and you do have Kanos in your area, I would recommend playing Spellfray Legs and then probably a Lantern, but that's 2 slots that I just don't want to afford to have at this point. And I'm playing, you know, the Tide Flippers if necessary. Being able to play blue allows you to support that kind of curve, essentially. So this is my sideboard. Very, very happy with it. Let's go into now, let's just kind of talk about like some of the bread and butter plays, having like a more blue line list of what you're capable of doing. So on an average day, when I sit down and play my deck, what I'm typically wanting to do is, if you're playing Mask Momentum, you can do your standard Cindra plays, but rather than before with a red line list where you're attacking with every card in your hand, you're able to actually start your turn with a blue, for example. So, you know, let's just say we have your standard hand here, 4-card hand. You just attack, you can go dagger, you play, I don't know, 3, and now they're presented with the choice, do I block, do I not? Let's say that they don't. You get your hit, you get your draw. If not, you can throw a dagger, hit them with the dagger, then you get your another draw, you continue, obviously 4. This is like what you'd standard play with Cindra would be, right, in a red line list. But now that you have blues, you can swap your play lines to where you can open with your dagger. So this is kind of where like the Katsu-esque play lines of the deck come into. You pitch your blue, you swing with both daggers, you now have 1 floating and 3 cards in hand. Now where this gets super out of hand, like I was mentioning before with Spreading Flames, is if you start with Spreading Flames, now your daggers are online. So with 1 blue, you are now having your Spreading Flames as a 1 for 5, right? And now you still have 2 other cards in hand, or if you play this from Arsenal, you now have 3 cards. And if you're having the Mask Momentum, they're still going to have to choose whether they want to block out a dagger or if they want to wait till you drop an attack. But now all your attacks have hit breakpoints, which is another reason why Rake Over the Coals is really good, because it does push all your attacks to being breakpoints, which makes it way more difficult to block out for your opponent consistently. So now it's super easy to buff like Blaze Headlong, for example, to make it a 5. This is now coming in for 4, this is 5. And then you have all your finishers with Lava Burst still that get buffed by Spreading Flames. So you could see here, just with a 4-card hand, this would be a 4-card hand, your Spreading Flames is a 1 for 7. That's ridiculous numbers right there. Like, that is a super above rate. That's like your Art of Dragon Fire, right? That's another reason why you play this card, because it's a 1 for 7. So spreading can do that, but just even on steroids, because now you can Dragon Scalar Flight Path at any point to swing with another dagger. If you had Rake Over the Coals, it buffs it even further. If you have Wrath of Retribution, this card, this now also buffs along this chain. It just gets absurd sometimes, where you have Spreading Flames and you have the Wrath, whatever. This card plus the daggers. Now your dagger's coming in for 3 throughout the whole chain link. It's pretty absurd. So another thing with the blue line list as opposed to the red line, which this is just kind of a Cindra thing as well. I like to come, you have on-off turns. So you're much more comfortable with having subpar middle turns where you're just making sure you're able to recur your daggers for your bigger turns to set up like your Spreading Flames and Arsenal or your Wrath. But it's okay to extend then. So when you do have your big turns with Rake Over the Coals or with Spreading or Wrath, you can really push your daggers to get as much damage as you want from them. So, you know, you can have these turns where you're going like dagger, dagger, this, and then let's say we had the Blood Runs Deep. So you have the Blood Runs Deep here. Let's say you have Lynx Mask as well, right? That you've popped. So you have these, now your daggers hit. And even if you don't have a way to discount, let's say you only had that one blue, when this pumps the daggers, you can activate Blood Splatter both times to gain 2 resources. So you get your resources back, you activate the Spreading Flame, or I'm sorry, you activate Cindra, you recall your daggers. So now we've attacked for the daggers here. You attack with the daggers 2 more times. If you hit with either dagger, you can then activate the Blood Splatter 1 more time to gain another resource. You can Flight Scalar, attack another time with a dagger, and then you can end with the Salt, right? So that's one example of just how ridiculous this would have been a 3-card hand, literally, you know, not including the Lynx Mask, but a blue, this, and this equates to, I don't know how much damage that is. That's just way more damage than I can even count. And now Spreading Flames becomes a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a 1 for 9. Guys, how are you going to tell me that Spreading Flames can't be in this deck? Like, this is absurd. 1 for 9 damage. We like would dream for stuff like that. So it's these ceilings that you're capable of just hitting with Cindra out of nowhere that you can just really push your opponent down. And remember, as their life continues to get lower, it gets more and more difficult for them to play because you are now exposing true damage to them, right? You have Art of Dragon Fire, which can just kill them if they're at 2 life. You have your Flick Knives, which every turn you're going to be flicking and dealing more damage. Oh yeah, and keep in mind also, you would have had a flick at one point in this turn as well, so that would have been 1 more damage. But anyway, so when you go for these mega turns like this, right, and you really overextend, the one bad part is you're now going into what I call is Jesus take the wheel situations, where you're going into your next turn with no daggers, which can be very terrifying because if you don't have daggers, unlike Fi, where you need a starter in your hand, Cindra always has a starter on board. As long as you have a dagger, you have a way to start your chain and to continue your turn. It unlocks a lot of the other cards in your hand. But when you have no daggers, it can get very scary. You end up with brick hands, or you get into a situation where it can be difficult to recur your daggers. And this is why we play the normal Draconic starters, like Ronin Renegade, Brand, Rising. You have these cards so that you can put yourself in these situations where when you get the opportunity to extend, you really can push past your hand with your daggers. And then your next turn, as long as you draw a starter, it can help you start your turn so you can get your daggers back for your next turn. Or another reason why we play blues is so that if you do overextend and push yourself out, all you need is a single blue, and you just pitch a blue, activate Cindra, and you get both your daggers back, right? So that's one of the advantages of having blues in the list, is that you can go for these big overextending turns so that you can make sure you can retrieve your daggers back, and that's where the consistency comes in. Unlike red line, where you don't have that necessarily, you do have the consistency of blue line to be able to rebuild your board and figure out how you want to manage your resources. Now, where the difficulty of this deck comes in is there needs to be a lot of foresight into your turn, right? This is where the Katsu aspect comes in as well. You do have to make some decisions earlier on, depending on how risky or how you want to sequence the rest of your turn. Because the decision to activate Blood Splatter to gain a resource at one point can end up being like, 4 to 8 more damage than if you decided not to do it. So you really have to be thoughtful as you look at your hand and look forward to your turn to understand the different paths that could happen based on how your opponent responds to your daggers potentially, or your on hits, or your triggers. So like Devotion Never Dies, right? I've had times where I've hit people with Devotion Never Dies like 4 times because I'm able to just loop daggers with resources and then also having a blue, right? Or having fealty on board. So I had one time where, what was it? I think I had a blue and Devotion Never Dies in my hand and a fealty on board or something like that, right? And so I pitched the blue, I attack with Kunai, the Kunai hits, my opponent doesn't block, I play the Devotion for 1, they don't block the Devotion, or I'm sorry, no, I activate fealty, right? I play the Devotion, so now this is Draconic in its own right, so this hits, it goes back, I play it again, its ability is online because it's recognizing that itself before was Draconic, and then since this is my 3rd resource, I flick the dagger, right? Gain a resource from Blood Splattered Vest, this hits, and then I do it again. So it's stuff like that where you have this, like, what was this? A 2-card hand that ended up being 1, 13, 2-card 13. Now granted, your opponent should probably block this, right? Like it punishes them for not blocking. But the ability for you to extend if you have the forethought and you have, so like me cracking the fealty here is saying, if this hits, I get rewarded. If it doesn't hit, I only get 4 more damage. But I have to like play into that to know what my potential ceiling is before I get into that situation. Because if I didn't crack the fealty and I played this, and this hit again on the next one, it wouldn't do anything, right? I wouldn't be able to recur it and play it again. So it's stuff like that. What else is there to talk about? Oh, you might have noticed that I'm not playing Oath of Loyalty. I really dislike that card in Cindra. I think it limits you a lot because what Cindra wants is you want to have the flexibility to branch your paths as the turn goes on, right? And you have a lot of cards in the deck that are not naturally Draconic. Like all your blues are not Draconic, right? So you can't throw daggers when you're under Oath. You can't end with Salt or Tenacity, which again, I'm valuing the finishers. You can't play those. And the other thing about Oath is the card really sucks when you draw it mid-turn, right? So with Mask of Momentum, a deck where you're drawing cards in the middle of your turn, again, where your path is branching potentially, you want cards that remain flexible and open. And Oath is not one of those cards. You draw it off of Ancestral Empowerment, Throw Dagger, Mask of Momentum. It's literally a brick. It doesn't do anything. I'm sure you can arsenal it for your next turn, but then it's going to lock you out of other paths that you could do. And I just like having the flexibility in my list to be able to not have to rely on Oath. And since I have blues, I'm mostly starting with daggers anyway. So I find to rely on the daggers more than like red cost starters to be a much more reliable and consistent way for the deck to operate. Yeah, was there anything else? See, there are like so many things with this deck and discussion points. So, as you watch this video, you can leave comments and we can have a little discussion in the comments as well about it. Because again, I'm not saying that this list is the perfect list. I do think I'm going to continue changing things and updating it as I continue to learn. But I think that this is starting to get to the point where you have a consistent equal amount of blues. You have varying game plans and adjustable sideboard depending on the matchups you're going into so that you can remain ahead of your opponent rather than them constantly countering you. And then having the option between Lynx and Mask of Momentum allows you to be able to switch the potency of how your deck operates, right? Because Mask of Momentum is a very powerful card. The threat of it is very powerful. But if you never get your draw from Mask of Momentum, you are just kind of playing an underrate deck. Lynx Mask allows you to constantly have that threat to your opponent of when am I going to pop this, and you have to always be playing around it, which can be very difficult for an opponent, especially depending on how big your turns get. And it ensures that when you do have the ability to extract value, you can get some really high numbers out of it. So in the matchups where Mask of Momentum is not going to be hitting, you're better off playing Lynx anyway, because you can at least guarantee the 6 to 7 to sometimes 10 value, right, that you could get out of the mask, rather than momentum, which is like a pseudo value because you might be threatening it on hit, but if you never get it, it's not really going to do you any good, and it's not going to allow you to win the game, basically. So that's where I'm at pretty much with the list. I'm very happy with where I have it at right now, other than finalizing my sideboard into different matchups and trying to understand what is the optimal game plan that I want to take into those matchups. But outside of that, I'm very happy with the tools that I have here. If you have any questions about different cards or why I'm playing certain cards, please let me know. This time around, as you know, if you have watched our videos before, we never post Fabry links in the description. There's a number of reasons for that. For me in particular, I'm very old school. I came from Yu-Gi-Oh! And back in those days, we didn't have deck lists. We didn't have links. We literally had to watch a deck tech and listen to them and then write down the deck by hand and then build it, right? So I think there's a lot of merit in that, and there's a lot that you can learn from it. But with something like this, where it's still kind of in a flux, where I'm still adjusting some stuff, I'm still figuring out the sideboard, and I think this deck is quite difficult, especially sideboarding. So I do want to provide to you guys the Fabry link this time around, and I'll be updating it as I learn more about my matchups, so you can actually see how I'm approaching different matchups. You know, there's 36 heroes in the game right now. It's very hard for me to make a video here that's less than an hour explaining all my strategies and how I view every single matchup. So at least there you might be able to find some more information. So, contrary to popular belief, we do not delete links that people post in our comments. That's actually YouTube. You're not allowed to post links in comments. YouTube has an automatic AI, I believe, that just deletes links. So that's not our fault. So I would like to provide the Fabry link to you guys. It is going to be https://fabry.net/dex/01JR10AAS6217243B as in boy, V as in vroom, VASYPAV9. Again, that code is 01JR10AAS62172432BVVASYPAV9. So I hope that really helps you guys. I'm happy to provide you the link this time. Please let me know if you have questions. As per usual, I love you. I look forward to your insights as well and the collaboration that we can continue to build. And I'm hoping this comes out before Pro Tour. If it does not, I'm curious to see if any Cindras do top Pro Tour and to see what those lists look like because we are moving into a very innovative period for the deck. And I think that we're going to start to see a lot of these concepts that I have presented here show up in more Cindra decks, such as the Lynx Mask, such as the finishers, and such as a higher blue count and potentially a similar ratio to kind of what I'm playing. So thanks for joining me today. I love you guys. I hope you enjoy the deck. Please give it a shot. And again, don't be frustrated if you try it. It is very difficult. And this might just be like, I've fine-tuned this particularly to my tastes, right? So you may play it and be like, this deck makes no sense. I don't understand these 2-of ratios. I don't like this 1 cost, blah, this sucks. That's all cool to you. It's very in line with how I play as a player. And again, I come from a background of playing Katsu and Fai, so I'm applying a lot of that knowledge and those techniques that I have from those decks into this deck as well. So keep that in mind. Again, love you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Enjoy the deck. Enjoy the link. I'll continue to update it, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out, guys. No, I don't want to do the what's going on, everybody. I'm bored of that one. Let's see. Let's come up with something better.